We're delighted to welcome Rob Watson back for the second session. In this session, Rob, if you could share a kind of a scenario where you've applied some of the techniques that we spoke about. So just as a bit of a recap for our viewers and for our listeners, in your mastering session, you spoke about the importance of creating a win-win and how you can move away from the solution in order to create that opportunity to create the right discovery, which form the foundations of building more larger, more meaningful, less transactional deals. So I understand the challenge in your topic, in the sense that obviously this is something that you can apply almost universally, as you kind of put it. But if you could kind of share some scenarios around this, I think that would be really great for our viewers to hear some.
So I could start by saying scenarios, which I'm sure would be annoying. But the scenario that I'm thinking of is a lot of times in complex enterprise selling. You're meeting with a client who has not a lot of time. They're busy, right? And they have a very specific thing that they've asked you to come and do. And whether that is a demo or a presentation or something like that, they really want to get educated, right? So they want to learn about your product so that they can make a decision, right? So we see this a lot. And I remember one scenario where Jared Firebaugh, who was one of our reps at Perfecto, and he works with us at Observe now, he and I flew to Detroit, and we met with an auto manufacturer, and we were there with an SE to do a presentation and a demonstration of our product. And always in these scenarios, you want to do some give and take. Of course, you want to provide the demonstration. A certain amount of the meeting is going to be taken up with you presenting the product. But we want to also use that face-to-face opportunity to do some discovery and learn as much as we can. So, you try to set up the expectations that this is going to be a two-way interaction, which they often agree to without, any hesitation. But a lot of times what will happen is, when you get into the meeting and you start asking questions, start maybe looking at their watch and saying like, hey, are we going to get to the demo? And then it's absolutely, we're going to get to the demo. We want to make sure we could show you, a 3-hour demo. We only have really 30 minutes. So I want to make sure we can tailor this exactly to what you want to see. Right. And then sometimes they'll lean back in their chair and say something like, wow, you're the expert, or just give me the harbor tour or whatever. And, in that scenario, what Jared said to the client was, I want to make sure, like, a harbor tour probably wouldn't be a good use of your time. What we want to try to make sure that we do is understand exactly what it is that you're trying to accomplish so that we can determine whether or not we have the ability to help you. And if we don't, by the way, we will be the first to tell you, because we don't actually want to engage in a project unless we have a high degree of confidence that we're going to be able to make you successful. So do you mind if we slow down and ask you a few more questions first? And, he sort of sighed. And one of the other people in the room started to ask, questions about like, oh, okay, so if that's the case, then you guys don't just do whatever, a transactional sale. You try to work with us to try to build like a business case or something like that. And we're like, yeah, absolutely. That's how we like to engage. And that brought the champion out. And that ended up being the champion that helped Jared get the biggest deal I think that he'd ever done, and helped Perfecto get one of the biggest deals that Perfecto had ever done. And so just by kind of slowing down a little bit and not just taking the bait and following the client, a little bit of courageous kind of pushback can result in, a huge transformational deal.
Yeah. As you said, you demonstrated that with an immense amount of empathy, right? So the customer's not going to be on a defensive position. They're going to be leaning in rather than leaning back.
And that is such a great point. So one of the things that I love about this is that especially when you're early in your career or you're starting with a new company, you're not necessarily, as the salesperson, going to be an expert. You're not necessarily going to understand all the ins and outs of the space. The person you're talking to probably knows 10 times more than you do about the subject matter. So showing up and trying to act like you're the expert or trying to put pressure on yourself to try to be smarter than the person that you're talking to isn't going to go very well, right? So you might as well just have a genuine curiosity. It takes pressure off you. It allows you to just be naturally curious. And then, you can focus on what really matters, which is the business acumen aspect of it. Because we all know that the client isn't going to make an investment unless it makes economic sense, right? So if there's no justification, the economic buyer is not going to back it, right? So, we at Observe are very lucky. We have something that helps clients move faster. It helps them cut cost. It helps them improve their connection with their clients. Like, speed, cost, quality, like those are the three sort of, points in the iron triangle. And so, it's easy for us to be able to kind of like slow down and talk about the value component, right? Not everyone's going to have all of that, but I think, the important aspect of it is like, it takes pressure off you as the salesperson to be the expert in the subject matter. You're then focusing on what you should be an expert in, which is the value, right? Like the value that you deliver.
Rob, in the example that you've spoken about, it seems as though the customer was probably perhaps in a position where they were thinking about observability. Obviously, there is a difference between kind of stealing budget and creating the need. So are there any scenarios where perhaps you've had to help the customer have the realization that this is actually the solution that they need? And how are the techniques that you're obviously applying? How if you could perhaps give us an example of that, I think that would be really useful as well.
Yeah, so that's where it's most important, Simon. So like in my experience, if you're selling something that's disruptive, right, the client is probably not necessarily aware that there's a better way. So what you really have to try to understand is the negative consequences of doing it the way that they're doing it today, right? So that's, in Medic, it's the I, right? So we're really kind of focused on the pain. But the client might not necessarily understand that this is painful. It's just the way that they've always done it. So at Perfecto, which was the example that I was using, it was automation of testing. So we had the ability to automate things that the client didn't know they could automate. So you have to kind of paint a picture and put yourself in the shoes of the client and try to understand their day-to-day. So their process. How do they do things, right? So today, if you want to test this application, how do you do it, right? And so from an Observe standpoint, what we focus on is troubleshooting, right? Because today, what's interesting is like the technology, every company is becoming a software company, right? And so software development has gone through this massive sort of change, right? And so CI/CD, agile development, moving so much faster, microservices architecture on cloud infrastructure, much more change, a lot of change happening in less time, a lot of complexity, right? And all of this is just kind of like accelerating, right? And creating more pain for customers that are trying to get their arms around or manage and monitor those systems. So the technologies that they're using today that they think are fine are not cutting it, right? And so we have to help them see that, look, the monitoring approach to this is not going to get you where you need to go, right? You're monitoring the availability of the components of your system instead of looking holistically at all of the system and how all of the components are related together to give you context so you can see things like impact. They're using 7 tools, paying all that money, and you have to paint the picture to help them to see that their current state is actually not optimal, that there is a future state that's better, and the value of the difference between the future state and the present state is big. And that gap has to be rooted in value, time, cost, quality, like the things that move the needle for economic buyers.
Sure. And I suppose this is where the techniques of ask, don't tell are really, really key, because, going in and loading up your champion with telling them rather than asking them, tell us a little bit more about that. I think that's quite key here.
Yeah. So we know, like, for example, at Observe that, there's troubleshooting pain. We know that it takes too long. We know that there are too many experts required, to troubleshoot issues, and that a lot of clients spend even up to a day trying to figure out when something's broken, what happened and why it happened, right? And so that's an example of something that they just kind of like, this is how they do it, right? But you have to kind of walk the client through the current state and then take this kind of troubleshooting process flow as your guide as you do discovery. So when something goes wrong now, how do you handle that? When you get an alert, like, what are you doing? How are you responding to the alert? Who is it in the organization that has the responsibility of doing that? And what tools do they use? And then you just kind of walk through a scenario of their day-to-day. And what you're doing is you're actually painting the current state and the negative consequences. And then you can contrast that with the future state, which is, have you ever thought about, doing this differently? What if you had the ability to do the following, which is the future state? What would that, do for your business? What would the value be for you personally, as well as to your organization? And that's where you start to pull out the positive business outcomes. So you create this, we used to call it the blue box, but it's basically, current state, negative consequences, future state, positive business outcomes. And that sort of framework is the backdrop for great discovery.
How do you get that to stay, right? Because in that moment, in that time, there is probably a realization that you've created that value. You've made them realize the current state. Now, the minute they walk out of that meeting, or the person walks out of that meeting, they're in amongst the thick of things. And natural curiosity or natural pain, people's natural instinct will lead them just to, do you know what, this is too much necessarily of a minefield. How do you reinforce that state of importance?
Well, the one thing that is true of win-win selling is that the client isn't going to buy unless the pain is significant enough for them to act. Like, it's just, those are facts. And so, if you haven't been able to paint a picture, Ollie, that's compelling, where they really sort of say, wow, yeah, I've been getting a lot of pressure to do things faster. If I had a way of doing it faster, that would really help me. And by the way, I could really benefit the business if I reduce the cost of our tool spend by $2 million a year, then it becomes kind of a no-brainer, right? And that's where you build rabid champions, is if you're solving something that is meaningful for them, like, wow, I could do this faster. I could work 2 hours less a day or not work weekends or something like that, let alone maybe get a promotion because you've, significantly improved the performance of your team, that's where those special things happen. But if you don't do a good job of identifying the pain and having the so what associated with it, you're probably not going to buy. And it's okay, by the way, if the pain is not there. Like if they're the best of the best and there's, I don't know, like zero pain, you're not going to sell them anything. So you can move on and go talk to someone else.
I suppose this is also the challenge, that if you are constantly going after the solution rather than being able to get away from the solution, you'll never be able to establish that discovery, right?
Yeah, and so the trap with technology-led selling, which many companies still do, and a lot of reps still do. And if you're fortunate enough to be at a company where the technology is just so good, you know what I mean, that you're riding that wave, then good for you. But when that wave stops, it's going to be it's going to be hard to maintain your success. So I think that it's absolutely key for us to be able to create that clarity and that distinction, of value. And I mean, the most successful reps do this over and over and over again at multiple companies, right? And are able to find that compelling pain, right? That thing that is going to motivate your champion to act. And that, if you're going to be a master, then you might as well be a master at that, right? Identifying what that looks like. And the technology, to your point, Simon, the technology led, if all you're doing is just giving information, do they really need you? Like, what are you doing that's really valuable, right? If all you do is coordinate the demo, then you're not really adding that much value as a rep. So the thing that you really want to focus on, I believe, is the value, becoming an expert at identifying, opportunities to move the needle for your client.
Amazing. So the conclusion is, if you want to sell more solutions, stop talking about solutions.
Yes.
Great. Well, want to say a big thank you, Rob, for taking the time to take us through this. Really, really valuable, and we're certain that our viewers and our listeners took lots of value from it. And we look forward to welcoming them all back for another mastery session soon.
Awesome. Simon, Ollie, I love what you guys do, and it's a pleasure to be part of it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so
Absolute
much.
pleasure to have you on the show again, Rob. And again, just to all our listeners, obviously, if anybody's got any comments, anybody would like to share any information, any experiences, we'd love to hear it. Please comment, share below. Really interested to make this an interactive opportunity for people to share their comments, share their experiences in similar sort of situations. So please do interact in the comments and share with your fellow colleagues. But thanks ever so much again.